romantic relationships. Am I completely faithful in the traditional sense? No. Why is that? That's a good question. I can't say exactly why that is, but I think that probably the biggest decline in the Western world I have to accept, even though I partake in it and even though I am guilty of it. I think the biggest failing of the Western world is that men and women do not stick together anymore. I think it would fix a lot of problems.
I find that very fascinating that that's the problem. You teach men to be better men and to fix their problems. Don't run away from it. But you know that monogamy is a challenge for you, but you don't want to...
It's not a challenge. Monogamy is not a challenge for me. Monogamy is a decision that every man must make. But for you to make that decision, you have to sit down and decide that this woman is worth me being monogamous to, which is fine. I think the biggest struggle that men have in the Western world today is finding a woman who they believe is worth being monogamous to. I don't think men have a problem with monogamy as much as men have a problem finding a woman who they truly believe they should be monogamous to. Also, there's something that's interesting about monogamy, because we can talk about this and it can be a very interesting conversation. In days of old, high-value men, important men, kings, warriors, whatever, had multiple wives. And they had to look after the multiple wives, or they had mistresses, and they had children with them all, and they had to look after them all. In certain cultures today, that is still the case. In certain religions today, that is still the case. In the Christian world, in the Western world, we have said that's unacceptable, we should be monogamous. But then you have the majority of men who are monogamous are cheating. The ones who are not cheating are using prostitutes sometimes, or going to strip clubs sometimes, or consuming pornography. So they're not truly, actually loyal. You've moved the idea of a man having 3 or 4 women he loves and taking care of to a man having 1 woman he's supposed to love and doing a whole bunch of things in secret. You've just subsidized monogamy and you've removed it all towards pornography and degeneracy. And you have to sit and argue, well, why does so much degeneracy happen in the West? Is it because we are not allowing men to be more true to their instincts? This is all brand new thoughts for me, and I'm just speaking as I think. But let's look at another example. But I'm just talking about it from a societal perspective. I'm making an overall societal observation, the fact that now we have monogamous societies, but because they're not truly monogamous, all of the desire is being outsourced towards degeneracy, as opposed to having a society where a man is allowed more than 1 wife, for example, and then the degeneracy isn't needed. You don't need pornography and you don't need prostitution if you're allowed to have 2, 3, 4 wives if you're successful. And the point I was going to make earlier is that in certain countries, this is still the case. And I'm just speaking here in generalities. I don't have proof for any of this, but if you look at Russia, right? Russia is a Christian nation. There's a lot of Muslims as well, but it's traditionally a Christian nation. But if you're a very rich, powerful Russian man, and I've been to Moscow, I can assure you, you have maybe 4 or 5 wives. Well, not wives, 4 or 5 girls. Your wife understands about who the other girls are, and she doesn't really care. Don't look, don't care, don't ask. I have a Bentley, I have a big house, I have the children. He plays around with these other girls sometimes. I don't care, I'm his wife, and that's just how things are set up. That particular man who's very, very rich, he's not interested in pornography, he's not interested in prostitutes, he's satisfied, he has enough for whatever his ego desires or his heart desires. Then you look at the West, and you look at the most degenerate things which can possibly happen, which are actually levels above prostitution and pornography. If you look at Epstein's Island, for example, when you have very rich, powerful men and they're told by the public sphere, you're not allowed to have more than 1 woman, but they don't have God to control them. They're godless. Then they say, okay, well, how can I satisfy myself if God's not restricting me? The society's saying I can only have 1 woman. I'm not allowed to have 4 or 5, which would satisfy me in some regard for my ego or unhealthy reason or whatever my reason is. I'm gonna end up doing things in private. I'm gonna end up doing things in secret. And then you have Epstein's Island appear. It's kind of interesting. God is important and God is extremely required to restrict people, but if you take the God out of the element and you only use society to try and restrict the sexual desires of people and tell them they have to be monogamous, you're going to end up with more degeneracy than if men were allowed to be polyamorous and have more than 1 wife. Does that make sense?
100%. And the reason why I asked you, is this generation more evil than the last? And I wanted to circle back how you said the West is falling apart. I believe that I always go back to biblical references, not because I'm an annoying Christian, but I just like truth. And I notice that truth comes out of these testimonies that I see. Yep. And the one thing that I've realized with humanity, God or no God, it's your access. Yep. And I think that's why God reflects the heart. He doesn't reflect your actions. Yep. He reflects your heart. Because let me give you an example, pornography. I don't watch porn. The reason why I don't watch porn is, 1, it's unhealthy.
For me, before you carry on, I don't watch porn because it's genuinely uninteresting.
It's gotten weird.
You could put porn on and I'd be like, I just don't get it. That's the thing.
And also, for example, I like to practice the monogamous relationship. So when I get married one day, I know my girlfriend's not going to be at the prime model look when she's 50.